ahead, Governor. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Can you just talk a little bit about, coming back to your normal day-to-day
Yeah.
from the campaign trail? How has that been going for you?
Well, first, it's a privilege. I said this is the honor for me to be able to be governor of Minnesota, to be able to come back to it. And I mentioned, I got asked, I got to learn so much about America, a privilege that I will be forever grateful for. But I also, like you always do, understanding what you have at home and how truly good things are in Minnesota, and to be able to come back. And I say that economy outdoors or whatever, but I would also make the case that our political climate is not as damaged as the national yet. I think it's still there, and I'm not naive, but we proved it in 2019. We're still able to get some things done. So I think coming back now into a climate that looks like we're going to get a split House gives us an opportunity to kind of prove to the country again we can get this stuff done.
There's been a lot of soul searching among Democrats about, what went wrong. Trump, in nearly all counties in America shifted towards Trump and Republicans compared to 2020. So what do you think Republicans and Trump did right, and what did Democrats do wrong?
Well, I'm not a political pundit. I said I'm proud of the work we did. I think we made a strong case that bringing down costs for people, focusing on things like health care, child care, home ownership, job training, those types of things mattered, and laying a plan out there. I recognize that Donald Trump won this. He promised them things that now I hope he's able to deliver. Because that'll be good. If he can get gas prices down to 150, if he can make sure these things happen, that would be good. And I think what we have to understand is the mood that where people are at, and understanding where they're at. I think economic issues did impact them. I think we're going to have to understand what type of leadership do they want. We were pledging to be inclusive. We were pledging to bring people in. Donald Trump has said that isn't what he wants. And so if that's what America's leaning towards, I guess for me, it's to understand and learn more about America, because I thought that they were going to probably move towards a more positive message.
Was it, the positive message aside, maybe, they were really voting on pocketbook issues. The economy was not working for them. Did you miss the mark on selling your economic agenda?
Well, we didn't win, if that was the case on this, but I think in contrast to what Donald Trump was saying, I don't think getting rid of the ACA is going to be good for pocketbooks people. I don't think allowing tax cuts for the wealthiest is going to be good for people. I think objectively, looking at bringing down inflationary costs, which we had, bringing cost prices down, understanding that people are hurting, I don't think cutting overtime pay for people is going to help with their pocketbook issues. So for whatever reason, we were talking about the things that I think matter. I think we were talking about the reality of it, but the American people went towards Donald Trump's message. And so I think we need to understand that. And like I said, it is truly my hope that he is able to deliver for the middle class, as he said, because that was our goal too.
California just began a special session to Trump-proof its progressive policies, give the Attorney General's office more funding. Of course, California, there's supermajorities in that legislature, very different makeup than here, but I'm wondering if you've contemplated anything that you could do, your office could do, or working with the Attorney General to do something similar here. Are you worried about that?
Well, I think we're concerned when we hear when for example, to your viewers that are listening, if they do eliminate the Department of Education, that fundamentally changes how education is funded. It depends on how, what curriculums and things look like. We're starting to think about what that would mean. If Donald Trump says he's going to pull back all investments, we just christened and opened up the largest solar plant, reducing costs for people, reducing carbons. If he's thinking about pulling those things back, we have to be prepared for how will we respond accordingly. And I think we have been thinking about that. We always think about that, whether it's economic changes coming up or whether it's natural disasters or whatever, preparing for that. We're thinking about what those would mean. And I'm asking my agencies to understand, what would it mean if Donald Trump does follow through with these things that he said he was going to do? What would that look like for us here, and how would we be able to respond?
Do you feel, though, that the Trump administration would single out Minnesota, target Minnesota because you were, his political opponent on this November's election?
Well, I think the people who voted for him wouldn't want that. That's pretty un-American. That's not the way it goes. But look, there's a history here. Donald Trump clearly stated he would not give emergency relief during wildfires to California because he disagreed with their politics. I would thought that might have been a reason not to vote for him, but that's not what the majority thought. My hope is that they would not do that. We will follow the rules, we will follow the law as we always have. I will say this, that we had a fairly good working relationship during the COVID pandemic, although I was very critical of the responses of the administration. I wasn't personally critical of the president in it as we tried to find solutions, because at the time of crisis, probably not the time to be having those fights. So my hope is that he would not do that, but I think it would be irresponsible of us not to prepare for thinking that may happen.
You heard from Republicans yesterday in the budget briefing talking about the ways that they see that they want to cut costs, and they want to put, state agencies on notice, trying to get an accounting of what they're doing and how many unfilled positions there are.
All those things are available now.
The data, you mean?
Yeah.
That they're seeking.
Yeah, it's all available.
So but some of that scrutiny and criticism is about, the management of these government programs, Feeding Our Future, one-time bonuses for first responders, the hero pay. Judy Randall, in a hearing about that Feeding Our Future audit, said this about your administration: state agencies don't necessarily approach their work with an oversight and regulatory mindset. What are you doing to change that?
Well, we'll put things in. Just data-wise or whatever, the suggestions that come from the legislative auditor, my administration has implemented more of those than any other one. So the statement is factually incorrect. That we do approach them. The people who did Feeding Our Future are in prison now, and the rest of them will be. Just like any business or any government, we do the best we can. We'll have a package of things to be able to fund the things that we need to do to make sure that we're processing all of those. This is no different than when someone steals from a private business, you make sure law enforcement is there. But we have always adhered to those things. We've encouraged it. In my time as a member of Congress, I was probably the most aggressive on putting in things on the inspector generals, making sure they're there. So look, and the Republicans, they can bring these ideas to them. If they've got good ideas, I'm open to hearing where they're at, and we'll try and make that happen. The one thing I did hear yesterday a little bit from them, pretty generic where they want to cut. What we know is there's a couple big drivers of where these things are coming from. When they say they want to cut state agencies, why do they want to cut the state patrol? Why do they want to cut corrections? Why do they want to cut snowplow drivers? Because they won't give you specifics, so I have to assume that those are the things they're going to look across there. They need to be more specific on this, but I'm open to them to talk about this. But let's just be very clear. State of Minnesota still has surplus, still has record surpluses, still has record growth, still has record, we're ranked as top state in many areas. Those things are all there. Long-term over the horizon, we have structural issues that have been there, and I have brought these things up. So I look forward to working with them to figure out how do we make sure that we continue on that solid path.
With that looming deficit in the future, are you at all concerned that there could be mismanagement of government funds that could contribute to those big drivers that you mentioned in spending? Are you concerned that some of that spending could be because it was mismanaged?
It always could be, sure. You'd always look for it, and if it was, we would root it out and we would make sure it doesn't happen. But that piece of that, or those things they're talking about, that's not what this is being driven by. 78% of this is in two areas. It's in education, especially around special education, and it's along disability waivers and long-term care. So the last 22%, we'll continue to look across the board, but the idea that you're going to think that one of these things, and again, every one of these people have been prosecuted for it, that's not the long-term fix. That's things we can work on together, and we'll have a package to work with them on that, but that's not the long-term fix.
There's a lot of new inspectors general in the different state agencies,
yeah.
But Republicans have talked about this, but so did DFL Senator Gustafson just proposed that she wants to introduce a bill that it would have an independent Office of Inspector General, not within the agency. I've heard this from Republicans too, that they don't want somebody operating within the agency to seek self-protection within
the agency. Well, that's the way it works in all ones. Yeah.
But would you support something like that? Do you think it could be streamlined in one agency?
Look, the reason that they're in there, and we've done this, is that I increased the inspector generals during the Bush administration, especially in the VA. The reason you have them inside the agencies is you have experts in there. They're not reliant to the agency. They don't report to the agency heads. They're inside the agencies because that's where they have the most knowledge on this. It's one of the critiques that have come out from the private sector, that we have folks who do these inspections who know nothing about engineering or know nothing about that. Look, we're open to it. We always are. If they have a proposal, we'd certainly look at it. But the idea is that we catch these folks. We've seen this across the country, that especially during the pandemic, there were folks that tried to take advantage of these things. They did it in every state. They did it in private businesses. They continue to do it. And those people continue to be prosecuted and put in jail.
Given the economic outlook with the forecast and showing, a smaller surplus and certainly the out year showing a deficit, do you anticipate any new spending in any program beyond maybe just, standard inflationary
Look, I think
increases?
that's the one thing I would mention, I think, to your viewers to understand this. Minnesota does something different than most states do. We include the cost of inflation into these numbers. Before our administration, you would have never seen that there would have been a $5 billion deficit coming. It would have been reduced to about 2 because you would have taken the inflation out of it. So we show the inflationary pressures that are in there. I think that's what the legislative session is for. And I have come in this, I would argue, unlike the Republicans, I've said, let's put everything on the table. I'm willing to look at everything. Are there things that are efficient? I've never understood this idea where they just do a blanket, we're going to cut everything across there. Why would you cut 5% from an agency that should be cut 50%? And why would you cut 5% from an agency that if you plussed it up, it actually leads to growth? Because what we know is that the Department of Transportation and so things leads to our economic growth. The training programs that we have in the Department of Economic Development, the investments. So philosophically, I understand this. Republicans are coming in, government can't do anything. I still come back to this is that from their point of view, we shouldn't be worried about 28, 29 because the Trump economy is going to be so good that it will make up a lot of these differences. The changes they're going to make at HHS on long-term care will fix these issues. So it seems a little bit disingenuous of me to jump right into this on something that's over the horizon, even though all of the indicators right now show Minnesota, second best state for kids, first best state for health care, top 5 state across the board for business. Those types of things are happening. We don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we can focus on, once again, for the 6 years we've been in here, we've run balanced budgets with surpluses.
When it comes to your political future, your term is ending in 2 years. You can run again. Will you run for governor for a third term?
It's not something I've thought about at this time. I'm focused now on getting through this legislative session. I think probably sometime, in the next year or so, you got to make those decisions. But I've always said the decision to do that is really driven more by the people as they start to see if there's a desire that the direction we're going, if we see the support is there, then I would listen. I said I've always never planned my life to do this. People came to me and asked if you wanted to run for Congress. Somebody said run for this, and I said even in this last run, I said it wasn't my choice and I did not seek that out. People asked us and I said sure, I'll serve if that's what you need. So I leave it to that.
But you're not ruling it out?
So at this time, no. Just
Okay.
We're just doing our job now and continuing on.
Do you think the national scrutiny of your record and that you were on a ticket that lost a presidential election, does that hurt your case at all to have, seek another office potentially or run for another term here?
No, I would leave that to them. I'm always reminded Abraham Lincoln lost and Barack Obama lost and others lost. So it's all part of it. No, as far as the scrutiny of the record, that certainly helps because I heard it across the country. A lot of states saying, I wish we were more like Minnesota. I wish we were doing things like you were doing there. I wish we could look forward to paid family medical leave. I wish we were protecting women's reproductive rights. So I think that part of it certainly didn't. But no, I think you put yourself in this arena. You do the best that you can. I'm proud of what we did, and the public spoke. And I think one thing that I think is really important in this is that Donald Trump won. We congratulated them, and we accept the results of the election. And that's a pretty important thing. And I would remind Americans that that's a pretty important thing to do, and I hope they continue to keep focusing on that.
You talked about, learned a lot about America on your time on the campaign trail. What do you think your biggest lesson in defeat was? Because you hadn't lost any office that you had ran for before.
No, I think it's always that to keep your ear as close to the ground as you can, and to listen to where people are at, to recognize where they were. Certainly winning in Minnesota was one thing. I think people knew us here, but not winning in the other battleground states, of understanding, where things were going for them. So I think for me, continuing to focus on those day-to-day things. And again, I made the argument that being a school teacher who was listed as the poorest person to ever run for vice president, I probably had a pretty good idea what middle-class people look like, as opposed to a guy who lived in a penthouse in New York City. But that's not the way the voters saw it. So I think for me is there a better way to articulate where we're at? And on a national stage, one of the things is you come into that as a blank palette, and they will paint you to however they want. I think it's important to stay focused on the things that make a difference to people, working with them, trying to find compromise.
your school teacher, don't have a lot of personal wealth. These
Yeah.
are things that people relate to. But why is it that Democrats are seen as the party of elites?
Yeah, I think that's something, again, I'm not a political pundit on this. I think we have to ask that question. I think when you look at who voted for Democrats and who didn't, it's not as simple as people say. It's not that everybody, there's some complexity in it, but there is no doubt that groups shifted away. Young men shifted away. Hispanic men shifted away. So you're starting to see some of that. I think we're going to have to figure out, are we communicating? I think we're communicating the right way, but are we communicating in the right spaces? Are we communicating to where people are at and where they're listening to? Are we getting out there? Because it's, again, to have Donald Trump seen as a champion of the middle class, I fully don't see how that would happen, but I recognize that's where people voted. So I think we have to both decide, is the message the right one? Are we resonating? And are we in the spaces where people are listening and where they're at? And a recognition that that Donald Trump understands how the media works in a way that that I think we have something to learn from. And I'm not saying this name calling and cruelty and some of that, because if you go back and look at it, I don't think it would have helped if the vice president and I would have held a town hall and danced for 30 minutes. So I don't think we were going to probably learn from him. I don't think he probably won because of that. But for whatever reason, there was a disconnect there of where we were talking about, because we were talking every single day about prices, about health care. I was out talking about an ag bill, a farm bill, infrastructure bill, job creation.
But you were also talking a lot about Donald Trump being a threat to democracy. And,
Yes.
people, and was that a misguided message? Because
No, it's
ultimately he
true,
won.
and I think just to say it, you got to accept the results of an election, and that was proven. That's not debatable. That's not a he said, she said thing. That is clearly, he lost the election, said he won it, and kept coming at it. Look, did it matter to people as much? Apparently not. But that doesn't mean you don't talk about it. If you believe it's real, you've got to talk about it. Same thing with, did we talk too much about women's reproductive rights? Not if you're Amber Thurman, who died going from Georgia to North Carolina. We probably didn't talk about it enough. And I think those are the things that the American people are going to have to come to grips with. But I don't think in retrospect I would go back and say we should have talked less about that, because those things are real.